Hello and welcome to a jenBear Designs video. In this one I'm going to show you how I painted this picture of some flowers looking up to the sun on a nice summer's day. I'm using watercolour paper. It's A4 size. It's got quite a tooth on one side and smoother on the other. For today I'm using the side with the more texture. It's got the tooth on it. First step is just using a normal propelling pencil. I'm doing a basic layout, trying to work out my composition. It's a lot of concentric circles are involved in this design. We've got the seed heads at the centre of the flowers, and the seeds are arranged in, it's like a spiral in reality, but because you can't see the whole of the seed head, I'm just doing them at concentric circles and semicircles. I'm starting to put in my seed heads with a black waterproof pen. It's a drawing pen with waterproof ink in. Because I wanted those seeds to be visible at the end of the painting, and it's such a fine detail in there. Pen's the easiest way to get that detail coming through. As I'm going through, I'll add extra shadows and depth to the seed heads. You can see there I'm just going around and I'm just shading in around the edges of the seed heads so they look more 3D. And we'll just speed it up and finish off those seeds on the other flower heads. Halfway through this my pen ran out, so I had to switch over to a Sharpie, which is fine, it doesn't really make any difference in the end. It's a very fine point Sharpie. Now I'm working out where to put all the other seed heads. You can see I'm drawing these concentric circles, and those seeds are going in layer upon layer upon layer. I'm going to rub out all my pencil markings now. If you leave the pencil on and then paint over it, the pencil is visible forevermore. The felt tips you can see me using here, absolute bargain. I got these from Tesco. It was £1 and I think there's either 36 or 48 felt tips in the packet. The water soluble, they work like a charm. I draw them in with the colour closest to what I'm going to paint, and then when you paint them in, they blend in with the paint and disappear. Much better than using a pencil that you know, you struggle then to hide the pencil marks. So I'm just working out my layout, putting in my petals where I want them to be throughout the composition. I like to keep turning my paper around as I'm working so I can see what it looks like from different angles. You can get a better idea of whether it's going to work as a picture then, rather than keep looking at it from one way up all the time. Keep adding in my petals and my detail. I've had to put in more of the pencil lines just to keep my petals in the right place as I'm going round. I had a bit of an issue on this bottom right hand corner with the petals overlapping one another. I'll show you how I sorted that out near the end. So now I'm just building up the picture, adding some more detail, adding some depth with the felt tip so I can see where the shadows are going to go. That's my tatty old watercolour palette. It's, I don't know how many years old. It must be at least 30 years old, if not more. It's probably more than that actually now. As the paints run out, I just top them back up from tubes of watercolour paint. So goodness knows what brands are in that palette now. Trust me, there's all sorts in there. And as I find a colour I like, I'll buy the little tub and put it in there. Building up the colour of the seed heads, I'm using a burnt umber, burnt sienna, and a lot of lemon yellow went into this, and some cadmium yellow. Starting to block in the flowers with lemon yellow. Just using a Reeves watercolour brush. This one's a size 3. I also use a size 4 for the bigger areas. Lots and lots of water. I'm not working on the wet background here. I'm just blocking in with very, very loose paint. You can see I'm going in with a slightly bigger brush there to block in the larger shapes. It's a flat by the look of it. Adding some cadmium orange and some cadmium red to add some interest and some depth to the colour. The sunflowers have got like a second layer of petals sitting in front of the larger ones, so I'm just putting those in now with the darker shades. Trying to get a clean colour from my palette was proving difficult, so I decided to mix them out of the tube onto the mat on my table. That mat looks jolly dirty, but it is clean. It gets cleaned regularly. It's just a bit stained. Building up the petals, trying to give them some depth. They are 3D, they do exist, and they have some weight to them. Putting in the red and the orange and just gradually building them up to get the effect that I want. That bottom right hand, all the time I was watching this and looking at it and thinking, I don't like the way those petals are sitting on that bottom right hand corner. We'll come back to those in a few minutes, I'm sure. Again, I've rubbed out all my pencil markings. I missed a couple of pencil markings and they show through in the final picture. So if you are doing this with pencil, make sure you get rid of all those pencil marks before you start painting over them. Trying to get rid of all the little bits. And I'm making sure that the work so far is dry, because I'm going to come in, I'm going to wet the background now. And once the background's damp, I just let the water soak in for a couple of seconds. Then I'm going to come in with some cobalt blue and just dot it in on top of the water that's sitting on top of the surface of the paper, and let the water and the paper do the work, and just it'll gently merge in to the background. There was a little bit of wet yellow paint still on one of the petals, so I've had to just dab it off with clean water, just dab off any mistakes, and then I'm going to have to leave it completely to dry, and then I'll go in and fix it when it's dry. Now I was looking at the seed heads and I thought they needed some highlights and some lowlights putting in. With watercolour you can't just put a paler colour on top of a darker colour, it just doesn't work. So I'm putting in some white paint over those seed heads, and when that's dry I'll go in with a highlight colour to create a 3D effect. So just took a little bit of time, there's just adding that little white and then putting in the highlight colour, but it's worth it in the end. It does make them far more interesting to look at. I'm just going in with the different shades of the oranges and the browns, building up the individual seeds at this point. And they're much darker in the centre of the seed head than they are on the outside, so trying to bring that element of reality to it as well. There we go. I like to work on different parts of the painting at the same time, so using the same colours across a piece, then it looks more consistent. If you've just got one glaringly odd piece of colour, it stands out like a sore thumb. Trying to now get my petals so they look more lifelike with a bit of movement into them. Still looking at that mistake on the right hand side. We will come in to fix that in a minute. Just putting a little bit of water on the background where there was a mistake. I'm putting yellow on it. Blot that one off and start again. We'll put some blue on, which is what the colour should be, as it's the sky. Let's put some more water in and then dot in the cobalt blue. It does look a lot darker than the other blue because the other blue's dried. It'll blend in and fade away to the same colour as it dries. It'll be fine. So that's one mistake fixed. And we're getting there now. We're going to start looking at these petals. I want those petals to overlap. So the one on the top right needs to overlap the bottom, and at the moment it doesn't. It's just looking very peculiar. Going in with a white marker pen here just to draw out where those petals should be, and now to hide all the mistakes underneath, I'm going in with thick watercolour paint. It's just white watercolour paint, and I'm putting it on very thick to cover over all the paint underneath. And I've decided to go round and add quite a lot to the whole flower head, because otherwise the colour wouldn't be consistent across the flower. And I want the petals to have a little bit more movement in than they've got at the moment. So once that's dry, I'm going in with yellow. This is a lemon yellow, just going over the white, and you can see how it is sitting on top of that white, and you can't see what's underneath at all. The white has acted like a mask. Can't rub it too much, can't put a lot of scribbling motion on there. Put it down quickly because it will mix with the white that's underneath. You just need to layer that colour on quickly and leave it alone to dry. So I'm just adding the lemon yellow and putting a little bit of white to it as well to add the highlights as I go along. So now we've got the first layer of the lemon yellow in, and we'll go out and add some more to the other petals and the other flower heads as well to make sure the picture looks consistent across the piece. And here we are, I'm adding in the cadmium red and the orange that I used before, building up the colours again. So I've got a really nice picture. Much happier with this because now those petals, the flower heads look like one sitting behind the other. It looks much, much better, more realistic, more lifelike. Putting in some shadows, some low lights, some highlights. I'm building it all back up again. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you found something of use in it. If you did, then please subscribe, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye now.